running a tournament is definitely not just necessarily about running a good tournament and giving legit, prize money and all that other kind of stuff, but it's also about, the service itself. So like the presentation value and the quality of the service. So, and if you really want to help that scene grow, like you have to get involved with those newer people and do whatever you can to make sure that they're not salty after they go on to.
Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
We're the podcast that chronicles the past and the present of the fighting game community and bring on various perspectives from Arizona. You can find us on Twitch when we go live at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, on YouTube at youtube.com/Spiral Series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. To all of you that have been watching and listening and liked and subscribed, we all appreciate you and thank you for your time and your support and for any feedback that you guys have. This is episode 9. I'm your host, Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, software engineer extraordinaire, Jon. How you doing, Jon?
Not too bad. That is my profession by trade, or I don't know what the right way to put that is. But,
hey, you gotta be positive. You gotta put, that's something you put on your resume, right? You gotta talk yourself up.
Yep, definitely.
I don't know if you'd put software extraordinaire or software engineer extraordinaire on there, but hey, you never know.
I think that the people that I know that put extraordinaire at the end of something, usually they put like a big tech product in front of it, like like a Kubernetes extraordinaire or an OpenShift extraordinaire, someone who really likes containerization for whatever reason. Anyway, I'm rambling. How's it going, Benny?
It's been going pretty good. I'd have to say, yeah, my week was pretty great. I don't know. I guess for I guess in general, like I just feel like I'm in a kind of a great place right now.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, just in terms of like everything, the podcast, like I'm motivated to do things like the pilot thing, and then like just in terms of like, when you're like jumping into a new endeavor or whatever, it's always nice to have like your family support or people support. Like, you don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber, a bunch of yes men and stuff like that. But at the same time, when it's something that you're pursuing and it's like you have the support of the people that you care about and like you care about their input, like that just makes things a lot easier. So
yeah, totally.
Definitely feel like I'm in a great place. So
I agree with that. I think this podcast is it's given us the creative outlet to it's like a way for us to express our opinions, but also to do it in a creative way. And then the idea of just being able to make something is super awesome. That's super meta because we're talking about making the podcast on the podcast. And I guess part of the cool thing about making the podcast is being able to talk to new and interesting people. And today we're going to be talking to Frank, AZHP. Say hello, Frank. Oh, let me unmute you. Sorry.
Hello there, mic check.
Hello.
I'm interesting. Wow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We got all these new perspectives.
Thank you, Jon.
Yeah. Before we get into like the particulars, I just want to say when it comes to Frank, like he's been one of the most welcoming people that when I came into the scene, started talking to him a couple years after I was here, I think. And just in terms of like events that he was hosting, he was very welcoming to me and especially my family. So, whenever he had events, whether it was at the gaming zone, I was at Cyber Zone, I think the cafe was. Yeah, Cyber Zone Cafe or Jesse James Comics. Like I try to find a way to get out of there, get out there and support him because like, like I feel like that's almost cliche. Like everybody I've talked about or we've had on here, it's like they've been welcoming, but I mean, maybe that's just the AZ FGC and the FGC in general. But yeah, that's what I think of when I think of Frank.
Say my experience with Frank at the start was very, it was cloaked in generosity, because what happened was I told my story about how I first got into tournament organizing a couple episodes ago, and one of the first people to like really support me in that endeavor was Frank. And he donated prizes to the free tournament. It was all about welcoming
UAT,
new people.
I remember.
Yeah, UAT.
Forgot about that.
Yep. And yeah, and even prior to that, like my relationship with him had been going to his tournaments and being a customer, so to speak, and really learning a lot about how tournaments work and having a good time getting to know the community, getting to know con community, which we will go into in depth, I imagine. But he's definitely been the front door to our scene for a very long time. It's great to have him on.
I really appreciate that. You guys are going to make me blush a lot here.
So I mean, I was just gonna say,
you guys are the leaders. Sorry, Benny, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say. So, in terms of your name, Frank AZHP, give us a little bit behind that. What does the AZHP stand for? Where did that origin? What's the origin story behind that?
I'll try to make this quick, but it's unfortunately it's really long. I've never, sad to say that I've never liked the whole AZHP as a name. So back in 2005, this is pre-Facebook. This is during MySpace era. There was not a lot of communication between people who had the same hobbies. So like anime, comic books, cosplay, video games. And all we really had was MySpace and the Anizona forum, which was like the very first anime convention in Arizona's.
Was Anizona?
Yeah, it was a standard PHP BB2 forum. Those of you old enough know what I'm talking about there. Yeah. And I wanted something that wasn't specific just to anime, that was a bunch of other things. And I had named it Hobbyists Forum. And this was in 2005. That lasted 6 months before we upgraded to a PHP BB3 forum and then called it Hobbyist Paradise. It was HP. I don't really like them now, like looking back on it, like it's kind of like that old crappy AOL email that somebody still uses and they just use it because they have to. So anyway, that's kind of how like HP came about. We added the AZ around 2009, 2010, because we wanted to show more focus specifically on Arizona. I mean, which was also a bad decision because later on we ended up doing a ton of tournaments outside of the state. And so many people from the out of state scenes kind of considered us outsiders strictly based on our name alone, which, judgment happens a lot in the local communities. FGC is included in that. So it was Arizona Hobbyist Paradise for a while, and I hated it. I changed it. I literally read through a dictionary trying to figure out the best of words. I came up with all kinds of things. The reason I still use it now is Frank AZ. I mean, that's me. I got rid of I used to go by Frank Castle AZ, but I wanted to get rid of the Punisher notation that I've had in an online name since, 2001, when we first all started getting on the internet. We had our silly names. I was named after the Punisher. But I also, because there's so much political misrepresentation of the character. Now, you have every Jim John with a Punisher logo on the back of his truck, and he doesn't even know anything about the fucking character. So I wanted to kind of separate myself from that. So it is what it is. But the reason I keep AZHP is, my last name's Harrelson. So Frank AZ Harrelson Productions. So that's why I keep it now. So I can now use it for anything. I can use it for Frank AZHP Gaming. I can use it for Frank AZHP Collectibles, which is something that I've been doing recently, just for fun. I can do anything, or I will just have my normal account just be Frank AZHP. So I think it worked out in the end. Though I don't look back fondly upon the naming scheme. If I was smart, and this is a kind of a tip for any business owner or future business owner, keep it real simple, real easy, something that's easy to expand, something that's basic, that is not a super long acronym, something that's easily Google searchable. I guess, hindsight's always 50-50. So, you look back at things and you're like, oh, I wish I would have named it something else, but, or I wish I would have named it one good thing and then just stuck with it the whole way. But that's how I got Frank AZHP. It works now, so I like it.
I think at one point it was even AZ Hard Punch, right? Was that the fighting game part of it, I guess?
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's a good way
And I
that's a good way to pivot into it, man. I like that it turned into Frank AZ Harrelson Productions. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good way to pick it up.
it really worked. It's funny too because when it was at one point it was Arcade Zone Hard Punch, and that was because I didn't want Arizona in the name because at the time then we were expanding, we were doing things out of state, and I had already had to deal with a bunch of drama from people out of staters like, oh, what is this guy and his crew doing? And I'm like, we're chill. We're just trying to have fun, play video games, spread the word. But people get very defensive about their their territories. So
Yeah, I get you. It's like
Yeah, I can
support
see that.
local and whatnot, right?
yeah.
Oh
So
yeah, I mean, yeah, the
it
whole
was
outsider
interesting.
thing, right? Yeah, defend the state or whatever,
Right.
that whole thing. So yeah, I could see that. So in terms of like uh fighting games, because we are a fighting game podcast, like I know you. A lot of people know you as like a TO. Did you ever play, or let's say, what did you start with in terms of like fighting games? Like, what got you into that arena?
Ooh. I mean, we're going back. I'm either turning 38 or 39 this year. I lost count because I can't remember. It's that irrelevant to me at this point. But I grew up in the arcades. That was, what we had on consoles at home did not touch the arcades. So my favorite 3 arcade machines, at least after my initial introduction to arcades as a whole, were Street Fighter 2 or any upgraded version of it, NBA Jam, and the original one that really put me onto arcades in the first place when I was a little kid was RoboCop. So and I liked some beat 'em ups. Everybody liked TMNT and Simpsons and stuff, but I was there when Mortal Kombat was coming out, and Mortal Kombat was in the arcades, and everybody was flocking to the Mortal Kombat machines. And I was like, I mean, it's cool because of the blood, but now there's no one over here to play with me. And of course, I saw it kind of go back and forth for like a 3 or 4 year period. But I'd always been a big Street Fighter guy, was way more into Street Fighter than I was Mortal Kombat, mainly just due to the the movements. I didn't like doing down, back, forward, and I didn't like the button layout as much.
Sure.
Although all American straight button layouts will absolutely destroy your fingers because they're not meant for it. But that's another thing. So I don't know. I just played a lot of Street Fighter there. Went over to Buddy's house all the time. He had GI Joes, which I didn't, but he also had Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo. So we would just sit there hours and hours, and even if I would spend the night at somebody's place and he had Street Fighter 2, I would just sit there in arcade mode trying to outsmart the computer.
Nice.
So I mean, it kind of went from there. I went in high school. I would go over to Castles and Coasters and over at Metro Center and Cyber Station after it was opened up. This is roughly 90. When I would go to Castles and Coasters all the way back, I guess till 97, 96 or so. But I started high school in 98, and then it was Castles and Coasters and Cyber Station. I think Cyber Station at Metro was open by then, so I was always there playing as well, playing Tekken Tag Tournament 1, and playing whatever they had. But most of the stuff that I played at home was PS1, Marvel vs. Street Fighter. I played all the the versus games, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom. I only had the PS1 editions. I didn't have the Dreamcast ones that came later, so we couldn't deal with the tagging back and forth. It was only assist with the. But I loved it. I loved Alpha 3. I fell in love with Alpha 3 on PS1 because there was only one place that had it in the arcades that I remember from Arizona.
Yeah.
And that was Golfland, and I didn't go there very often because I lived in Metro Phoenix area. Golfland is obviously that's far on the east side. So when you're when you're a junior high and high school student, you're not driving around all the time for an arcade, especially when there's one nearby. Yeah. But I loved the single player edition of Alpha 3, and I fell in love with that. And me and all my my stoner buddies from high school, we all just played tons of fighters all the time. It was either Alpha 3 or Marvel vs. Street Fighter, or Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. So I didn't play a lot of Super Turbo at that point, or any 2 at that point, because at that point in like the late 90s, no one thought about like, oh, let's go back to Street Fighter 2, and
Yeah.
even when Super Turbo came out, I remember Anniversary Collection came out for PS2, and it blew our minds. But we barely ever played the Hyper Street Fighter 2 on the Anniversary Collection. When we put that in the PS2, it was for Third Strike. So played a lot of that. But what I found was I didn't do a lot of tournaments either.
Mhm.
As a player, even though I could beat some local people, I would do some tournaments, and I would usually never go 0-2. I'd go 2-2 or something in a tournament.
Yeah.
I found that once I started kind of seeing the conventions and wanting to see the conventions do more and things like that, and started running a couple small tournaments, I realized I found way more personal satisfaction out of like providing a tournament for other people and getting to see them have fun and have them compete than just competing in it myself. It was just way more fun. Like not even a comparison. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like I love playing, competitive games. I played in 12v12 Battlefield 3 ESL tournaments where winner we're going to DreamHack and we got second place and it sucked. Like, I don't get me wrong, I love competing, but the satisfaction scale out of like competing in a tournament for me was very, very small in comparison to the feeling that you get when providing for other people. And that it was like a drug.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I got you. Yeah, so you mentioned like playing at or seeing game rooms at conventions. So prior to you getting involved to that, like was that like I'm from Alaska, so like we didn't really have I didn't attend any kind of like cons and stuff like that there. But was that something that was happening at those events, at those cons at the time?
I mean, their game room consisted of like maybe a hotel room. I think there was only 2 anime conventions, maybe 3 anime conventions in the state of Arizona before I started doing them. And by the time that I did that third anime con, I'd already done 1 or 2 comic conventions as well, doing the game room. But those first couple anime cons it was just a bunch of consoles in a hotel room on the first one, and then the second one, I think they had a room and they had like 7 or 8 random things, brought from home, which I'm not hating on. Like, you got to start somewhere. That's cool.
Yeah.
And, whoever that was that set that up, good for them. So, but I feel like I wanted more. I wanted more gaming programming. I wanted to build the local scene more than just, a thread on Shoryuken Tech Talk, or a thread on Shoryuken, a thread on Cheap Ass Gamer, a thread on, there was all these forums back in the day that had like, a state thread or something. And that was kind of like the only way that you could really communicate with other people.
Yeah.
And especially coming from and seeing a lot of the community members from like the convention scene, they enjoyed and they wanted to get involved, but I know that they would go to Shoryuken and see the Arizona thread and see the massive, massive amount of shit talking that people were doing in that thread. And they were just intimidated. They didn't, they wouldn't want to post. I mean, even me a little bit, I was a little intimidated. I would still post if something was going on or whatever. But it was just, yeah, it was different. So I figured like, hey, if I can run a couple events, run them really well, do them with a bunch of friends, have a bunch of fun, maybe we'll start to develop a larger community of people. And that's pretty much what happened. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, since we're kind of getting into the history of AZHP, and both in the name, but also, could you give us like a 1 or 2 sentence overview of what AZHP is? 1 or 2 is probably too little, as much as you need. But
I'll try to do 1 or 2.
Because we're gonna go deep for sure.
Video gaming service provider for events, arcade stick modding, and live streaming. I mean, the evolution. I mean, it was around for in its original format for 16, 17 years. Depending on when I say the end year was,
Sure.
which we can that can always change. I can always give you some more info on that later. Right.
Yeah.
Right now it's kind of on a pause, but it went about 17 years, so like it evolved quite a bit. As a gaming company, gaming service provider. So we pack up, go to an event, set up, run the event, break down, and that doesn't include the social media and the graphics and the emails, the event coordination.
So
Okay.
I guess what I'm curious about here is like we've talked about arcades, and we've talked a lot about organizations, and like I have the Spiral Series organization, but I don't think we've ever had anybody on here who's like, that's what AZHP is. It's a business. There's like an actual business entity behind AZHP, right?
Yeah. I mean, for a period of time, a lot of time, there was a very long period of time when it was a forum, and its first, I want to say 4 or 5 years, where it was just volunteer. Like there was no pay involved. It was just bring our own stuff, a group of people. The only reason it turned into more business related is because we got tired of using our own stuff, and we wanted to kind of get AZHP its own stuff to use that, so we wouldn't have to use our own personal stuff anymore.
Sure.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it difficult switching to the company model, like having to like file all the paper, like what examples of some kind of paperwork or any kind of stuff that you'd have to do to set up a legal entity like that?
At the beginning I didn't know anything at all, and I didn't hardly do anything at all. It was just it was being claimed personally because it was just one man. It was a one-man show, and it was a hobby. It wasn't it didn't really have an official business until partners got involved later down the road. So when it was just me, which was the overwhelming majority of the time, and even now, it's there was no it was not listed as a business. It was just a straight hobby of mine.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. But when people were involved, like partner wise, that's when we filed business paperwork and stuff like that.
Okay.
So and usually that wasn't really me. That was somebody else. I would be the hands-on on site getting the things done and things like that, and they would be the behind the scenes and finances and things like that. So it was very, very grassroots.
I get you.
I got you. What was the first event that you started with?
The first event that we ever did video gaming at?
Yeah.
Phoenix Comic Con 2006. It was September of 2006. Yeah, that was the very first one that we ever did. It was one of the 4 Mesa rooms at the Mesa Convention Center.
Oh wow.
Which I know that layout so well. If I'm not mistaken, it was 500 square feet. That's it. We had about 15 consoles crammed in 400, 500 square feet. It was pretty gross. It was, it was hot. It was very warm. But it was fun, and that was the first one.
That's crazy to think about, because I've been there for various things, ZapCon, other things, but just to see that, because now it's in the huge Phoenix Convention Center now. But like, what? So I was always curious, like, how did you go about even getting started with that? Is that a matter of like reaching out as like a vendor and like putting in like a vendor application, or was there something else
like
besides that?
How I started out doing game rooms at events?
Yeah, like reaching out,
So
how did you get that? How did you get that
Forum and Hobbyist Paradise was the spot if you were into anime, comics, games. Like all the convention directors were on my forum.
Okay.
Wow.
So like everyone, until Facebook really started taking off in like 2008, 2009, if you wanted to get the word out for any Atomic Comics Anime Fest or convention or video game tournament or cosplay photo shoot, anything, then you went to Hobbyist Paradise and posted it on the forum. So like it was unavoidable. You know, the convention directors knew who I was and knew that I was constantly trying to grow the scene in any way possible, including, you know, trying to step up and do gaming. So, you know, there weren't really a lot of options now. Like what I can give an answer to for you is definitely nothing that anybody's going to be able to do nowadays in 2022. So, you know, just because we all, it was a very kind of tight knit community. There was, I want to say about 1,200 people total. And it was every single one of them were a bunch of geeks that normally go to conventions. And I mean, there were people that, you know, were my video game moderators that draw comic books now. I had a comic book moderator that ran all the anime fests at Atomic Comics. I had a cosplay moderator that was the convention director for 2 different Taiyo cons and a Saboten con. I mean, the current director, the current owner of like all the anime cons in Arizona, or all the well-known ones, you know, was a user on the forum who would go to the meetings to Arizona with me to figure out what was going on with the convention scene. The guy who owned Phoenix Comic Con at the time and all the anime cons at the time, before sold to somebody else, was someone that, you know, was familiar with me and the site and all that kind of stuff. So it was just like, it kind of just happened because I decided, hey, I want to do something for the community and put something together. And because I did, I kind of got lucky towards, you know, then being able to step up and run the game rooms. So
I'm curious about how those relationships started with everybody who joined the forums. Did you have a chance to meet them in person? Was it word of mouth throughout the years?
Oh, I mean,
or
it was word of mouth. I mean, it was essentially wasn't really a whole lot different than like Shoryuken's forums operated. You could register as a normal user and then start posting. There was, you know, the pinned stickies with the rules, and as long as you posted within the rules, then we didn't care. It was actually, we even decked out. It was like a decked out PHP BB3. I'm talking when you posted, you got points. You could spend the points in a shop to have little photos under your avatar.
Sure.
On your posts. Like there was little level systems where it was like a level bar, and there was like 10 levels. So the more you posted, the more points you got, the higher the level went. So I mean, it was a fun project between, you know, a buddy of mine who was pretty good at coding and myself who focused on the design, and we just would sit for a weekend at a time at 2 computers next to each other, and just he would pass me dimensions, I would do something in Photoshop for design and back and forth. And then so we had this decked out forum, so like it was pretty cool, but definitely a lot different than the way things are now. So
yeah, the way of forums has unfortunately gone. Though, to be blunt, I think they're better for a lot of things than what we use today.
I would, yeah, honestly, when I think about it, absolutely. I think if we still had forums, it would probably be a lot better than our current social media issues.
I agree.
For marketing, promotion, communication, community as a whole, networking, like, yeah.
That's the thing that makes it like, because you know, while we were talking about the website, I was thinking for a while, yeah, this is just Shoryuken, but for Arizona anime. But Shoryuken, you know, Arizona had one thread on Shoryuken, right? But it sounds like for this site was dedicated specifically for a community that was local based in Arizona and had every intention to meet up, right?
So I imagine we did meetups. In fact, yeah, they were called AZHP meetup. I think we did like 8 different ones.
So I think it's if I were to go with an analogy, I wouldn't call it Shoryuken. I would call it almost like a local subreddit, right? Like our Phoenix or something, where it's like, hey, we're doing meetups, right?
Yeah, I guess kind of like that. I mean, I mean, I know Shoryuken only had the one Arizona thread, but I mean, it's not hard to imagine it just
Yeah.
being in Arizona instead of Shoryuken, and
Yeah.
then it's just different topics instead of
Yeah,
one
different.
thread where it's a bunch. Yeah, but like
I
mean,
think one of them feels more like an online community, and one of them feels like a real like homegrown community. And I think AZHP, you know, because you guys were meeting up with each other, because it was based around networks around Arizona specifically, and you would come together to celebrate the hobbies. Like
yeah. Now that I think of it, even we had 2 different categories for events. So we had present and future events, and then we had the past events. So anybody that registered that was running an event, no matter what it was, could post their event and the details. And you know, there would only be like 2 or 3 pages at a time at most. So the ones that were coming up soon and the ones that people were attending, whether it was something run by me or a convention or an anime fest or an individual game tournament or whatever, those things were being popped up to the front. And so everybody was able to like know when those events were, know when they were going to come up, talk about what they were going to do or who they were going to play or what they were going to cosplay as and stuff like that. But yeah, it was much more focused on not only meeting people online and having a communication and relationship there, but then like taking that and then meeting the people in person, be like, oh, you know, what's your username? Oh, nice to meet you. So yeah, probably more closer to like the Reddit or maybe like a weird amalgamation of the two or something.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not replicated today, but there's traces of that DNA of that old grassroots style of community on the internet today, I think.
I think it'd be fun to go back to the Wayback Machine for ArizonaHP.org.
ArizonaHP.org. All right, we'll look that up.
Yeah, I'm curious to see remember some things.
So going back to that first event that you ran a long time ago, just to kind of rewind it all the way back to that. I was curious. So it was in 2006. Do you remember what games were run at that tournament, if at all?
Third Strike, Guitar Hero, DDR.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to say. Like
2.
Guitar Hero 2. That was around when that was exploding, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I remember we had one LCD in the room. Everything else was CRTs.
Oh wow!
So we had a bunch of PS2s. Oh, I had GunCon 2 games. So like Vampire Knight, Time Crisis 2, Time Crisis 3, and like 2 other games. And so we would have 2 GunCons, and so 2 people could play GunCons together and a bunch of different games there. I could maybe somehow find what the lineup was, but I think we ran like 15 tournaments or something that weekend. I didn't realize it was smarter to narrow that list down to make sure that things run more smoothly until later on in my tournament organization period.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, we had 32 tournaments at Zona 3 in 2007.
Oh wow!
Damn.
But it was also a 24-hour game room, so we had a new tournament every like 2 or 3 hours, including late night.
Wow!
And had some weird obscure stuff like Power Stone 2 and Twisted Metal 2 and it was interesting. But yeah, I would have to look up what the I don't want to like.
I mean, I got plenty of examples there. That's a very large amount of games and a wide variety of genres too. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was gonna say too. Is like, you definitely went more beyond just fighting games, because even just like your general tournaments and stuff that you were hosting later on. I remember, there's Call of Duty, Gears of War, those kind of things. So I'm interested more in like the progression, like with like the Phoenix Comic Con, because that's something that a lot of people know about, right? And you said it started at Game On, and then now it gravitated to the much larger Phoenix Convention Center. How was the transition for you into that bigger space, into that bigger, like, I guess, as the community grew? Like, did you get a lot of feedback from people about things they wanted to see, or tournaments that they wanted to play in, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think most of the time we had what the overwhelming majority of people wanted to see. Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, at least for fighting game standpoint. And then we would also do shooters as well, Gears, Halo, and COD. And those are kind of like the main 3 shooters. And then other than that, of course, all the fighting games would switch depending on, the year. We would try to listen like, oh, okay, what do you want to see? And if there were enough people interested, we would run a tournament on it. Or if we didn't deem it necessary, we would say, how about you run a side tournament on it? We will put it on our official schedule or something. And then when would you like to do it? And we'll put like side tournament hosted by somebody. So we just kind of like picked whatever was popular and known at the time, and with the exception of Smash for time's sake, for certain stages, all of the rule sets that we used were like official rule sets that would be used at Evo.
Yeah, like competitive.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we were running, at least fighting game community wise, was the exact same stuff that the community as a whole wanted to see, plus probably a little bit more, because there was a time where people didn't give it any shits about 3D fighters, or minimal shits. Same thing with anime fighters. I know that there is a lot of guys that are in the anime fighting game scene that were constantly at the anime shows, which it makes sense. So, but back when we were first doing it, not very many people were even aware of these tournaments. Blaze Blue, what's that? Guilty Gear, isn't that some old like PS1 game? Like that's, people didn't know.
Right.
And, meanwhile we're running Accent Core plus R on the PS2, and some people are like, I don't know what this is, but it looks cool. So, we tried to do whatever people wanted plus a little extra.
Yeah. Well, I guess I never thought about that from that perspective, because obviously if you run a tournament, like, if I run a 3-game tournament and I want to throw in like a game that I love and then nobody shows up, like that's, it's kind of like, well, I'm probably not going to do this again. Whereas in the convention center and that game room environment, like you could kind of just do whatever you wanted in a way, right? Like, you had a much more open, I guess, just open environment in terms of like what you wanted to run. Like you said, like I could run this, and like maybe it's not something that's, gotten a grasp in the fighting game community itself, but it was like, hey, well, I can host it here just because, hey, I got the space, I got the setups, whatever, and whoever's, like you said, there's a crossover between the anime con attendees and then the players, and it was just like, hey, we don't normally have tournaments for this, but you can play in one here.
That made running fighting games a lot easier as well, is because anime. It was it's hard to justify running Halo or Call of Duty or Gears of War at an anime convention. It's not hard to consider any fighting game except for, I guess, maybe KI and Mortal Kombat because they're American made. But
yeah, Street Fighter, I think, and Guilty Gear, obviously, as they've kind of embedded themselves as Japanese staples to the exported culture that they have. One of the things that I really want to hammer home here is, you said you ran tournaments for what people wanted, and when you think about who people are, there's a bunch of different audiences that you have to cater to, and then so we've, Benny and I have talked a lot about tournament organizing on this podcast, but we do it from the perspective of the competitive fighting game player. So somebody who would go to Evo, somebody who would, care about running on a specific monitor, not playing on a TV that has input lag and stuff like that. So the hardcore audience, really. And I think that one of the challenges that running a con tournament has is that your audience is not necessarily that pinpointed group of people. And so, how do you cater to that audience as well as several other kinds of audiences, personas for the con, basically?
That's tough. But it's not tough the way you think. I mean, the people that want to play in tournaments at conventions, for the most part, except like when you say cater to the large audience, the hardcore fighting game audience.
Yeah.
Completely understandable. I get it. But what games are those casual people or people that would be designated as non-hardcore fighting game fans, what games are they going to play? Right?
Candy Crush.
Well,
That's my
no,
guess.
I mean they're going to play the same games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Like
buy that.
everybody
I buy that.
play everybody's okay with Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct and
Yeah.
all the anime fight. Like everybody wants to play those. So the hard part was not catering to two different audiences, because if people wanted to play casually, they could go to the casual stations. People want to play tournaments, they can go to the tournament stations. Or you want to play casually? Okay, then don't play in the tournament. Like it's not that hard. If you want to play this game and we're doing a tournament on it, just play it on a different system, on a free system, or wait till the tournament's over, come right back to the same station. There it is. So like those people were playing the same thing. The hard part was getting those casual people to not be mad at the hardcore or the tournament organizer for using hardcore rules, because there's a lot of casual people who they just want to come in and have fun and play. They don't understand how a double elimination bracket is. They don't understand how seeding is. They want to just come in, play, laugh, win, and they won't, but they want to come in and win. And then when they lose, they're going to get mad at something too. They're either going to be mad at the tournament organizer, which happened a lot. They're going to be mad at, the player that they were playing against. So this is another reason why I also encouraged a lot of the fighting game community when they came to the events, be like, hey, try to help these people out. I'm sure both of you have been to many of my con tournaments. How many times have I tried to pass around flyers for the fighting game communities, or said hey, try to help this person out, or whatever, just try to make it as welcoming as possible, which was a little difficult. So it's just, when you think about it, when's the first time you went to a hardcore show and you were able to beat all your friends, and then you went to the hardcore show, like, man, these guys are kicking my ass. If you were adult enough to say oh, maybe this will help me get better, then good. Then you are in the very small percentage, because the most people are like, fuck this game, I quit. I don't like this. I don't like these people. These are cheating. All you got to do is look at scrub quotes on Twitter to see all kinds of stuff like that. So,
and again, I think that's a grace that as part of the competitive community or the hardcore fighting game community, we get that grace automatically, where somebody goes in and they enter a tournament, they know what they're getting and they know that they suck, right?
Yeah.
But for your use case here, you'll have somebody who's wandered across from the con, just wanting to having a good time with their family or something, and being like, oh yeah, I am hot shit at Street Fighter, I'm gonna go kick some ass over here too.
Everybody thinks they're good.
They get the wake up call, man. Yeah. And every fighting gamer has that origin story where they thought they were hot shit and then they're not. And so I think you actually got to create the environment you got to kill Uncle Ben, is what I'm trying to say.
I took the blame for it for so long, because people would go, oh yeah, I don't like, they're too hardcore over there, and they're they won't let me play this, or whatever. You can't please everybody. So
that's the thing I was gonna say, because me and John were talking about this after I went to Game On and he had went to Evo. It's I went to Game On mainly to play Tetris, right? And when I didn't do well in that, my whole game plan was if I do well enough in Tetris, I'll play in their play-in tournament, or their tournament that they had, and that was my rest of my day. And then the backup plan was if I don't do well in that, I'm gonna go find some free fighting game tournaments, and I'm gonna go beat up on some people there and make myself feel better, right? And so that's exactly what I did. I went to play. Well, it was for SAT Gaming. I entered Tekken, but I didn't do well in that. But the one guy that I did beat, it was it's funny you talk about that perspective. He literally sat down and I have my stick, and he's like, this is my first time ever playing this game. And I'm like, why do you feel the need to qualify, or even or I guess even say that? Just play the game, whatever, win or lose, I don't care. And then it's one of those things, I'm not even doing anything super complicated to me, but to him, I was doing these 3-4 juggle hit combos, and he's like, oh man, that was really awesome. But I'm just I'm kind of rolling my eyes, and I'm just no, it's not.
We got elitist Benny over here.
I was gonna say, don't
have Benny running the convention rooms.
in the interest of being real, because like prior to me running tournaments or even having any kind of name in the scene whatsoever, I did go to your tournaments, Frank, and like the con tournaments, and just non-con tournaments in the comic book shops and whatnot too. And the kind of people that I would get to play with were people that I didn't ordinarily get to play against in the competitive scene. And what would happen is they would either react really negatively, but they would also, or they would react, they'd fucking hero worship you. And not in a weird way, but being like, wow, you can do that? Oh my God, you can do that combo? Oh, that combo's into that? That's a combo. Like people will, so what ends up happening is that the competitive community gets their ego boosted because they're like, oh yeah, I am hot shit. But at the same time, you also get the joy of showing people stuff they had never seen before. And I think that was the closest that I got as somebody who didn't go to arcades growing up. That's the closest I got to the arcade experience, where I got to run into random people who I had no clue, and Frank got to be the front door for those random people and got to see all the negative stuff. But the positive stuff is that these brand new people would come in and you get to wow them with how awesome fighting games are. And that's super fucking cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, like it's there is that kind of like hero worship in a way, because it's like I saw something on Twitter or something where somebody was just like, you do something cool and somebody thinks you're Daigo, but you're just like, no, like I'm not even there, you know what I mean? But to them, like you're so many levels above like where they're at, and like to go back to Frank's point, like the hard part is dealing with those casuals that don't, that aren't used to being in that environment, right? Like you think you're hot shit, you play your buddies, whatever, you play online, then you go to some place where there's somebody else that's, just kicking your ass, and you're just like, a lot of people, like, they have to rationalize, like, oh man, well, this guy, he's got no life, blah blah blah. It always starts into some kind of little trash talk like that, and you're just like, I don't know. It makes me think of this situation that Saber had at Game On, or not Game On, at ZapCon, where somebody was being real salty about, like, they were in like a random tournament, like just going to random cabs, play this game, and like, Scott would like destroy this guy, and then it would just turn into this whole like demeaning thing where he's just like, well, you have no life and this and that, and he's just like, what are you talking about? I got a wife and I got a kid and I got this and this and this, and it's just like, why do you have to be so salty? But
That's people.
that's just
That's
that's
people. It
that's
doesn't
like
matter what community, what hobby. People are just
it's just one of those things, like you get put into that situation, right? When you're not used to it, you're used to going online and you're used to beating up your buddies, and all of a sudden you get a reality check, and like some people don't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
Like me, like, I sometimes, like, I think of it like the old school mentality. Like, I'm just like, man, this guy just kicked my ass. Like, how am I gonna go back and beat him? Like, I'm not just like, you know what? You're a cheater, blah blah blah. You use this, you got an arcade stick, I gotta use this pad. Like, that's not my mentality at all. My mentality is just like, how do I figure him out, and how do I beat him?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And I always like going back to something that I had mentioned earlier and expanding upon that, because you made me think of it. Everyone thinks that because they can beat everybody in their local neighborhood or their local friend group that they're good. So as a, when I was doing tournament organization on a regular basis, somebody would be like, oh, you run tournaments? Oh, cool. I play Call of Duty.
That was the example I was thinking of too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if you want to, you can show up at my Call of Duty tournaments, but I can guarantee you right now, you're going to go 0-2, because I know how, because everybody that walks through the door has their ego up here.
Yep. And
they don't realize that, like, we already have a ranking system for the top 10 in the state for the Call of Duty, at the time. So I'm like, all right, yeah, go ahead, come in here. But I can guarantee you, don't go in expecting you're going to win right away. Like, you're probably going to go 0-2. You're going to have to start training. You're going to have to start, trying to learn. But the mentality that you have, Benny, that you mentioned, is a lot different than the mentality from a lot of people on the casual front. If you have the mentality of, this person beat me, what can I do to change my game to beat them? Or reach out to them and be like, hey, can you help me get better? Because if I get better, then you get better. And then I get better again. And then we just both keep getting better, because, that's a great mentality to have. But so many people would have that salty mentality. And what are you going to do?
I think it also coincides with video gaming as a whole where video gaming has, I think, become more socially acceptable. I kind of talked about this when we were in our pre-show, but like I think nowadays, like back then, people thought, Street Fighter is a video game and it's for kids or whatever. And so, I grew up playing that game and I'm 40 years old now and I'm playing and I'm losing. Well, it's just a friggin' game anyway. You're mad about everything and stuff like that. But I feel like as video gaming has become more legitimate in the cultural sphere, I feel like that happens less. Like people don't have extreme unrealistic ideas of their actual skill level. And I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure. What I've noticed for fighting game players, at least the newer people that are coming in lately, have been way more humble and way more. And so I wonder if it's just a product of the arcade generation, if that makes sense. I'm blaming old people is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know.
I don't know if I would call the convention anime scene that I TO'd for the arcade generation.
Oh, that's fair too.
Because I mean, by the time I was doing, my first one in 2006, like arcades were dead by that point.
That's true.
There was 4 or 5 in the Metro Phoenix area total. Arcades kind of died in what, 97, 98?
Yeah, it was pretty.
Besides, like your GameWorks bar or what the Arizona Mills one was.
Yeah, GameWorks.
It's
GameWorks still there.
Land.
But yeah.
Except for like, the whole Dave & Buster's type of thing. Like arcades are still dead. I mean, yes, we have some cool ones, mainly barcades. But
I think that's
shout out to Starfighters Arcade over in Mesa because they're awesome.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I would kind of disagree in terms of the whole like. I don't think people have become more humble. I think. I don't know. I think it really depends on the person. Like, there's just always going to be those kind of personality types, regardless, like whether they're going to con tournaments or whether they're going to fighting game tournaments. Because I brought this example up before. Like, I've seen people come to fighting game tournaments. They know what they're getting into over there, right? Like, that's not just a public thing. They know that they're going into some place that's like a hardcore setting. They'll go there. I'll see them go 0-2, and I will never see them again. So my mentality isn't always just like, I'm always wondering why they don't come back. And like, it always just comes back to, well, I think they just got humbled and they don't want to go beyond like the level that they're at. And they're okay with that. And I mean, and that's fine. Yeah. But it's just more like, whereas I would have been like, man, if I went somewhere and went 0-2, I would have been like, man, I need to come back and I want to do better than I did last time. Like my origin story was different because like Frank was talking about getting your ass kicked when you went. My first tournament, I got second place. I thought it was hot shit. And like, I mean, if I got first place, who knows how I would have been after that. But I mean, I got that whole like Alex Valle Daigo thing, right? Like I was just like, I thought I was like, these people don't know me. I go in, I get second place, and I was elated. I won $50.
What was the first tournament you went to here? Was it one of mine?
No, actually, no. So I was talking about Alaska. So the first tournament I went to in Alaska, I got second place. Here, the very first tournament I went to here was in 2010 at Ranbat at the Sandwich Shop. I didn't do good there, but when I came back in 2012, my first tournament was at one of the Hasbats. I think it was the first one of the season. And again, at that tournament, I thought it was hot shit because I came in and I got third place. And I beat Ernest that day. I beat Isaac that day. People didn't know who the hell I was. Latif didn't, Latif was there. He got first. Nico was second. I got third. And I remember like, everybody was kind of talking shit amongst themselves. Like Isaac's like, oh man, you lost to this guy. And then I go on and beat Isaac. And they're just like, what? They're like talking shit amongst themselves. Like, how'd you lose to this guy too? And then they like, I think even in the stream chat, like if I find the archive, like Latif had like like my friends were in the chat. They're like, oh, this guy's from Alaska. This, blah, blah, blah. And like, yeah, again, I got third place at that first time that I was, when I officially moved here. And, again, I thought I was hot shit. And then, as things progressed and like, I was going to other Ranbats and stuff, I got humbled. But, it's a different kind of perspective from what you said.
Well, going back to what you said about people going 0-2 and leaving, I do feel that, and I tried to do this as much as possible. You guys know, whenever I would run an event, even especially if it wasn't a convention, if it was a hardcore tournament specific event, like the ones at the comic shops or the game shops or whatever, if there were new people in there, I'd be, oh, hey, how'd you find out about it? And I'd try to give them some attention, and I would try to preface their tournament entry with, hey, just giving you a heads up, if you go 0-2, don't take it personal. I want to see you back here next time. Yeah, I feel like there's a certain level of the tournament organizer that needs to reach out to those people and say, like, hey, you're new here. I don't notice you. Where are you from? You know, like, what got you into fighting games? Like, you have to like talk to them and treat them a little bit differently. Like, oh, hey, what's up, Benny? All right, I'll see you later. You know, and then talk to like the newbie that had never been there before. So I feel like, running a tournament is definitely not just necessarily about running a good tournament and giving legit, prize money and all that other kind of stuff, but it's also about, the service itself. So like the presentation value and the quality of the service. So, and if you really want to help that scene grow, like you have to get involved with those newer people and do whatever you can to make sure that they're not salty after they go into, and be like, hey, if things don't go right, just play casuals, learn. Don't, you can say like, hey, don't hesitate to like ask people for help. There's tons of people in the community that are really helpful, that are really cool, that'll help you grow as a player. And that'll be like, oh no, this move can beat me here. And they'll teach you that like right there in casuals, and they don't mind. Sure, some people want to keep their secrets, but like the community is very, very welcome on competing. So it's definitely a big part of the tournament organizer's responsibility to find, welcome, and encourage to come back all those new players.
I think that's one of the things that I learned from you watching you run tournaments, Frank, was specifically the line of, how'd you hear about us? You asked that a lot. And I remember taking that and being like, oh, that is a really good idea, because I don't know where these people come from. And it's a good way of like figuring out, okay, where do I put more of my time in trying to reach out to a certain community? Maybe we can get more people playing,
Not only that, but social as well.
Yeah.
Because then it gives you something for them to talk to them. Oh, so you found out about from so-and-so. Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It drives the conversation forward.
But I wanted to add that.
Yeah, because then you build a relationship with the player, and then they can either choose to take that and be like, oh, I do want to push that to the next level, or not. Because the other angle here is that we talk a lot about intent, and so like, Benny, you talk about going to your first tournament. You go to your first tournament because you wanted to enter your first tournament. But I think for a lot of people who enter the con tournaments, it's like, I'm here because my niece really, really likes Ruby or something, and so I'm here, buying stuff with her, but she's hanging out with her friend right now. I'm gonna go play in this tournament, and so the intent, they may not actually say, oh, how, I heard about you because I don't like, they may not actually know anything about the scene. They may not know about that competitive video gaming even exists, and so like they may not take that drive to get better from their loss. They may just be like, well, fuck this game, I'm gonna go pick up my niece.
Right? No, that's something like I didn't think about that either, because I'm like the whole prefacing like the 0-2 thing, like it's one of those things like you hear from like work all the time, like set expectations, right? It gets people in the right mindset, and it's just like, well, if some bad shit happens, then don't be surprised, right? And it's just like, I'll admit that's not anything that I've done. Like a lot of times it's always like kind of in the middle of a tournament, or maybe afterwards if you see somebody lose, and maybe that's probably the worst time to talk to somebody.
Yeah,
right
it
after
is.
they
They're
take a
gone.
loss, or after they're eliminated. Hey man, how'd you hear about this? And just like, oh no, they're not in the best moods, right? They just got their ass kicked. Like that's probably not the best time to talk to anybody. But that's a good point in terms of like just, or even just establishing. Even you don't have to say like the whole don't be surprised if you go 0-2. It's just more like, hey, how'd you hear about this? I don't remember. You're not somebody that I know. I haven't seen you around here before. That kind of thing. Just establishing that in itself, I think, is a pretty big thing.
Never think
about. Situational, depending on who it is.
Yeah.
The equivalent that I can think of is when this is like in 2010 or something. I was on a trip to Vegas with my friends. It was like a college thing, and we were like, oh, let's go and play poker. And none of us had ever played poker before. We sat down at a casino table with poker, and we tried, and we lost immediately. And then we dipped because that sucked, and we lost. But I'm sure the guys that took our money, and the guys that beat us in poker really badly, were like the same as it's like at a con tournament. It's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm raking it in, I'm having fun, a good time playing this game. But also some newbies came up to me, and I'm sure if any of those players had like been like, oh yeah, you got your ass kicked, but here's what you could do to get better. If we had talked And for whatever reason, I bet like I may have even picked up competitive poker or something. Instead, I was just like, I'm gonna leave because I want to go do other stuff, and that's kind of what happened. That's what it reminds me of for some of these. A lot of these people are like they're coming in and they just want to go do something else afterwards. They had a good time. Maybe they didn't because they lost, but whatever. But every now and then you get that one player that is like, oh, I came in and I wasn't expecting to do well, and I did do well, or I am suddenly burdened with the thirst for knowledge, and you get a convert, so to speak. And there's got to be a better word than that, than convert. But I think of it as somebody. Say it again.
Recruit.
That also sounds.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Yeah, it's somebody that they go from casual to being like, I kind of do want to get better at this, and that's really hard to inspire in people. And I feel like I can count a lot of people in our scene throughout the years that I've seen that have joined the community through AZHP and through the con tournaments. So like,
that was the goal. Just get people involved.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never always about me either. I didn't have to have anything invested into, John's Spiral series to donate stuff. Like, I didn't have to have anything invested into like the Smash community to have them bring flyers to put out, like same thing with all the different communities. It wasn't about me. It was about, in a way it was kind of about me, but then again, you could say that with any type of altruism.
Yeah.
If you are altruistic on any type of thing at all, you are getting personal satisfaction by doing things for others. So in a way, it's kind of selfish, but you can't define it as selfish because that means that every bit of altruism is selfish. It was just like, for me, I wanted to spread the word, get the community out, help people. It was just the personal satisfaction of like providing for the community. So the more people, the better. And for me, it wasn't about like, I did not treat tournament organization like a competition. And I'm sure, John, you even know this because you were running tournaments with T-Dot.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I had multiple times on all the way across the board for all TOs tried to reach out and be like, hey, look, so-and-so's doing something on this weekend. So-and-so's doing something on this weekend. Like, we need to all have a group chat of the head TOs and like communicate and make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes. And John, as you well know, and Benny, as you know now, because when I was first dealing with this, I don't think you were down here yet. You were still in Alaska. But some TOs were just like, fuck you, Frank. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm like, hello, do you not realize like this is not benefiting the community by you stepping on my toes and his toes and whatever. Like, it's not benefiting anybody. It's not benefiting you, them, or the attendees. So some people would say F off, and some people, for the most part, we would, figure something out on schedule. I think for the most part, the fighting game community has been very, very good at, scheduling around each other.
I don't know. I remember we butted heads a couple times on about a lot of things. I'm trying to remember.
You mean fighting game community or me and you?
Me and you specifically.
Really?
Like when we were like, I don't think near as bad as some of the other drama, but like I will say like I remember that being the big issue with being a TO was having to fight over dates and having to deal with people getting angry with each other about that stuff, right? And I remember, like, I want to underscore what you were saying, and that did happen a lot, and it fucking sucked.
Well, I mean, I always tried to make sure that everybody didn't schedule over each other.
No, I think we did.
Think of what we butt heads on.
I think we butted heads on. I think it was on seeding or something, or like what software we use. That's what I remember.
Well, there was never really like a universal across the board TO decision on that.
Yeah,
Back then, TO tournament organizer was still big. Challenge was barely getting launched, and it did not have near as many of the features it does now. I don't even think anybody uses Challenge anymore, right?
They still do, but
I use it for basic stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
I use it for real basic stuff because it's real easy. Smash GG, like you got to get people to sign in and register themselves and all that stuff. Challenge, it's just like, here, let me make a bracket. What's your name? Throw it in there. You're good.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Tornamento was another one that just never took off, if I recall correctly.
I always liked TO because it was local. I could save the files. I could. I mean, it had its downsides, of course.
I think you and I disagreed on that one a lot because I was like, hey, the internet's here. We got to make it so people can view the bracket. But on the flip side, your use case was cons at that point in time. And I remember that like you couldn't necessarily get internet sometimes, right? So
yeah, that was the biggest reason why I stuck with TO instead of it, is because I would say 1 out of every 10 conventions we had an internet. So unless we had a dedicated phone attached at all times, you know, challenge doing it on a phone is just not ideal. Like maybe on a tablet, but I mean, even then, you know, it's obviously better to still run on a computer.
And even then though, like, so if you're barely having, if you're not able to get an internet connection to run your bracket, like say goodbye to a stream and that kind of stuff that people hold as like standard now, right? Saying, oh, you have an event, is it being streamed? Well, no, because I can't get internet in the venue. There's not a reason for that, you know?
Yeah. That was another very tough thing dealing with in the early days of streaming, is trying to get the convention directors to get a stream, or to get me internet so that we could stream. And then they would get us a connection, and it was a garbage connection, and we'd be streaming in 360p and still lagging. And then like people would get mad and be like, your guys' stream sucks. And I'd be like, what the fuck am I supposed to do here? You know, like,
and I honestly, so that's the part where I think I butted heads with you, where I felt like, I think I was one of those people giving you shit over that stuff. And so again, 10 years later, this is my apology for it.
It happens. I got shit for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Some of which I was guilty of.
Fair enough. But yeah, I do remember that constant battle of like, because that's around when I was most active, of trying to coordinate around a bunch of different organizers. Some people wanted to run tournaments on the west side. There would be days of, what if we run 2 Street Fighter tournaments the same day? You'd have to work around a convention schedule, and then we'd have to work around Rambats, which was, you know, bi-weekly, and that schedule was fixed too. And it was always so like, kind of, it was always tense. I think I remember that feeling.
I didn't think it was tense, but I think the majority of what I had scheduled, I had no control over. Which was so. I mean, I've done 210 events in 5 states in 16 years.
Wow.
And I think 110 of them, or 112 of them or something, have been conventions. So a little over half. Now I can't move a convention date. So if Street Fighter V Rambats are running on a convention day, then all I can do, and this is what I did, is just change the day of it. So I would, instead of running Street Fighter on Saturday, I would run Street Fighter on Friday. So if people from the hardcore community really did want to come, you know, it wouldn't be crossing over. I did that as much as I could. I did that with the Smash community by running Smash tournaments on Sundays as well. Smash was always a Sunday day because there was Smash every single weekend somewhere, you know, for a decade. I don't even know if that's still the case, but nonetheless, like I did everything I could to like work around people's schedules. But the conventions, I didn't really have a choice in moving dates of.
Totally.
Whenever I would do hardcore tournaments for the individual communities, I would always reach out to you and Keith and the Gaming Zone, Euphoria. When I say Keith, Euphoria Gaming, I would always reach out to me like, hey, you guys, these are dates that I'm looking at. This is what I'm, you know, thinking about. What are you guys thinking about? So like, even when, I think it might've been you guys, or it might've been somebody else was running Street Fighter Rambats. And so we were taking turns running Rambats. Yeah. So we're like, I would run.
Oh yeah, you did run Rambats for a while.
Yeah, that was the Jesse James Comics thing. I think it was during that time.
I ran some Rambats at Cyberzone as well.
Yeah, and you had shooter Rambats too. Well, I remember that being incredibly novel.
I also created, because there's no shooter scene. I mean, there's a couple people from that original scene that I helped build that are running some online tournaments on the Discord. But like the shooter scenes are dead. So like since I left, nobody picked up the mantle. It's something I'm a little bit bitter about. Not necessarily that somebody hasn't picked up the mantle, but that I helped build a scene and build a community for these shooters. And because of AZHP kind of moving on from the convention scene, we no longer really had the funds or the resources to run tournaments for the hardcore scenes anymore. So anything that's not fighting game community in the state of Arizona, and I mean, I guess maybe a little bit of rhythm game community is dead. Like,
I didn't know other scenes were not doing hot. I guess the pandemic also has a lot to do with it too, right?
It does, but I mean, we had a decent amount going at one point. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on for all the different scenes, but
Well,
you know, I really wish somebody would have kind of picked up the mantle and ran with it and done more. Keith from Euphoria Gaming has been doing some Call of Duty stuff. I gave him admin access to like the Arizona Call of Duty Twitter and admin access on the Discord and the Facebook, which nobody uses Facebook anymore. Fighting game community uses Facebook. No other community does.
Not by choice. I don't know how. I tried, man. I tried looking to get people into a Discord. Like, oh man, at least for Street Fighter. I have no idea how to do this social media game nowadays. But to zero back in, you mentioned that AZHP moved away from the cons and whatnot. And do you want to describe briefly like what happened after? Like, what has AZHP been up to after running those 200 tournaments, or like in recent years? What have y'all been up to?
Me. I've been up to doing what I want. And this is this is kind of tough. So I loved providing tournaments. I loved doing it. I loved meeting people and having people meet each other and having them get the competition. Like, that is a very, very special place in my heart. And there's a lot of people who, even nowadays, occasionally somebody will reach out and be like, "Hey, Frank, haven't heard from you in a while, but really want to let you know that staffing with you at the shows or doing these with you really helped me, improve mentally or really helped me with job later in life," or something like that. And when I get something like that, it really, it makes me feel like it was all worth it, because there are a lot of doubts, and mainly because, when you do something for 16 years, I made a lot of personal sacrifices for myself and my future by doing AZHP for 16 years. Like, I worked a part-time job most of the time, and then I did AZHP on the side. I didn't have a career. I didn't have a college education. I chose to try to do the tournament and the event coordination thing all the time, or as much as I could. And I gave 16 years. So, like, I don't regret it. I don't think it was a bad thing. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people, and I will always treasure those moments. But there is no doubt in my mind, I spent so much of my own money. Like, by now, at my age, I probably would have owned my own house and had multiple cars and, like, made other financial mistakes, or financial mistakes that weren't financials put into gaming for AZHP gaming. So, I would have done other things. But point is, now what I've been doing now, I'm just doing me. I'm doing what I want. I've sacrificed so much of my life for doing things for an attempt to help other people and help a scene and a community, and not just fighting games, but like even dating back to the forum period. I miss some of it sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's been nice doing what I want to do. I don't have to spend hours in Photoshop and spend hours emailing people. I hate moving equipment. I moving equipment. Like you guys know this from someone who's done literally like 210 events in 16 years. Almost every single one of those events, it was me picking up equipment, moving it, loading it. Like, I hated that. But I don't know. I do what I want. I will get off of work. I'll get blazed. I'll play some video games. I'll cook. I'll relax. I sleep more. I feel I'm doing a lot more for me that I never did before. And I feel it's better late than never.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's so weird too because it sounds selfish, but I know like I paid my fucking dues. Like I don't need to be, I don't need to spend my entire life, for video game communities. I think after 16 years, I'm good. If I do it again, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And
I
it
agree.
won't be doing people's events. It won't be doing other people's events in other people's locations with their quality of internet connection, if any, with their prizes, with their rules. Like, no, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be me opening up my own shop and doing things the way that I want, which is, would be the way that the people want it. But yeah, I'm done with being a traveling.
And I hear you.
I think both of us have also made that decision throughout the course of our lives as well, being like, I think I'm done doing TOing for however long. And you may come back to it, you may not, but like when you described it as a mantle, I think that's a good way to put it. Where there was somebody who ran tournaments before us, and there'll be somebody who run tournaments after us, right?
Yes. And all we can do is try to get as many people involved now, and try to, make sure that they're, or hope that someone picks it up and runs with it when we're done. Yeah.
And we can totally play like armchair quarterback and talk about our experiences and set the bar high for the next person.
I definitely, me personally, I try to fill that void just by helping out with various things like here and there. Like I'm not the guy that's heading everything, but like every year that Undefeated's been going on, I've been helping with that. Armando's like, well, you're the head Street Fighter guy, I'll put you in charge of that. And I'm like, cool. Like, I still get to be a part of that, but I'm not like the head guy, and I'm not making all the other executive decisions. He'll put it on me, be like, I'll ask him like, hey, what do you want me to do with this? And he's just like, that's on you. And I was like, okay, well that's cool. I'll handle all this. So, I still try to get my fingers in here and there to help out with things like that. I mean, who knows? I wouldn't say I'm like completely out of it, because there's still that itch to want to do something, I guess, when 6 comes out. But it's not going to be something where I'm like real heavily involved. It might be like a once every 6 months kind of thing. Like, hey, I'm doing something, that kind of thing. Maybe some, random team tournament or some random stuff that I do. Another Scrub Cup. I don't know. Maybe I'll think of a different name. So,
as long as you're having fun with it and it's not burning you out. So then
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. I mean, I hope, like you said, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, doing things for yourself, especially when you like you said, you sacrificed a lot of things. And I hope a lot of people don't look back at that and take any of that for granted, because I, for one, like I said, you were one of the most welcoming people in this community, especially to me and my family. I think for a lot of people, like I think when they come in and they play in tournaments, yeah, like I think that's jarring for a lot of people, because like they expect to just see one a single person come in, right? And maybe a girlfriend, maybe a whatever, maybe a friend, right? But then like
so
I'm coming
wholesome,
in, 3
man.
kids
I loved
in tow
it.
and whatever,
Like,
and people.
I mean, it wouldn't have been wholesome if I didn't like you, though. I would have been like, oh man, at least his family's cool. He's kind of a dick. No. I loved seeing you guys there too. I loved it when people brought family. Like Fatty would bring his girlfriend. Anytime they're hanging out. I would have a bunch of Call of Duty kids. Their moms would come and hang out, and I would just half the time, or no, not half the time, I was running a stream, but a bunch of times I would just sit there and bullshit with their parents, which is cool. Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about like stepping away and what like the mantle and how it'll pass on to somebody else, and after a while we all just end up looking after ourselves, and then every now and then coming back to it. So in the interest of asking like what it would be like if you came back to it, Frank, if Street Fighter 6 came out this today, how would you, carte blanche, how would you run a tournament series for Street Fighter 6 in 2023, 2022, whatever?
I mean, I wouldn't run it any differently than the way that I've run things for 2 through 4 or 2 through 5. So like, I
He just wanted
mean,
to have his own. He just wants to have his own place, his own setup with
yeah,
internet and stuff like that. Yeah.
it's not necessarily about like me changing the way things were operated. I mean, sure, there are some things that are newer now. I mean, I ran VH236H, aka Evo monitors.
Right.
They were the second best LCD tested monitor ever made, 8 milliseconds according to either 8 or 9 according to DisplayLag.com. The ones Evo used before they got sponsored by BenQ, but they are 60 hertz monitors. I know there is some changes going on right now as well with the fighting game community. A lot of people are switching to PC and using adapters. So I mean, like, that's a whole nother issue. Like, if I was going to deal with that, would I have to get new monitors? Would I have to upgrade graphics cards on PCs? Would I have to, buy some adapters and things like that? So, if I was running things now, it would be a little bit different if I was trying to cater to an extreme. But I've made exceptions in the past. Like the first year that I had ran Mortal Kombat Ranbats, which was Mortal Kombat 10, we were running it on Xbox One because that's what the community originally assumed that Mortal Kombat was going to be running on. The performance of the 360 for fighting games was way better than the performance of the PS3 for fighting games.
Yep.
So when that next gen came, everybody kind of assumed like, okay, well, it's going to be the same way, especially with the, KI being exclusive to Microsoft. So let's go ahead and invest into Mortal Kombat and KI on there. And then we'll run the anime fighters on PS4 because we know every anime fighter, from a Japanese developer is going to be released on a Japanese console way more than it's going to be way before it's going to be on an American one for the most part. So I would make some exceptions. So it's very possible I would run Street Fighter 6 on PS4s.
Okay.
Because maybe I don't know do people even have PS5 sticks? Like, look at what we did when there was the conversion between PS3 or 360 PS3 and then the next gen. Some of those were compatible, but some of them weren't. So a lot of stuff we just ran on older consoles because people didn't have the newer ones. People didn't have PS4s yet.
That makes sense.
Guilty Gear, when Guilty Gear first got its revitalization and everybody was hype, we ran, I'm pretty sure we ran the first two, 3 tournaments on PS3 because that's all people that's all people had sticks for and equipment for. But I mean, it's going to change eventually, I guess. If I were to run it today, it would just depend on what my budget was and what the community wants. If the community wants it on PC, then you got to run it on PC.
Oh, okay. So you run on PC. Okay, I see
if the community wants it, it just depends. You can't run a tournament for the hardcore community and not have it be what the hardcore community wants.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's every single one of my tournaments, even the convention ones.
Yeah.
I would always run official rule sets and the official, version on whatever system of preference. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes you got to make some what's the word I'm looking for? You got to go midway. You got to meet.
Compromises. Yeah.
You got to make a compromise sometimes. And if you got to run your first 3 or 4 tournaments on a compromise on an older system, so be it.
So for real quick in the chat right now, someone's asked if Street Fighter 6 is going to be on PS4. To be clear, it is being released on PS4. There's no confirmation about any tournaments running it on PS4 right now. We're just talking hypotheticals. But just the last question that I have for you is, we've been talking about the theme of what would you do if you started running a tournament right now, and not very much different, but what about hitbox? Would you ban hitbox or would you let it rock?
I had a feeling it's funny because we planned this, me being on the episode a long time ago before this entire shitstorm, by saying it lightly. That's saying it lightly. As I've grown my opinion on my opinion has changed a lot. So
Okay.
my opinion is irrelevant, just like all of our opinions are irrelevant. And everyone thinks that their opinion is relevant, even though they're not. I mean, and I'm talking generally here. I'm talking about anything and everything. This is why I don't post on social media anymore. Sorry, not trying to stray too far away, but I never liked the hitbox, and I recognize my bias from hitbox, which stems from lack of friendly communication from Hitbox themselves originally, as well as their bad modding work originally. Now, from what I understand, it's changed quite a bit, but still has some flaws. And I'm talking about official Hitbox here. I'm not talking about Hitbox in general. So I already had some bias towards Hitbox. Now, by itself, I think it's fine because it's literally just mapping buttons that are already existing elsewhere. But what I do have a problem with, and once again, my opinion doesn't matter, but I'm being asked for it.
Yep.
It
matters here, man.
is perfectly fine until you start being able to do things that you are unable to do on default controllers such as pad or typical stick. So, obviously the new recent shitstorm that's come out on this is because of the 4-frame Ryu Super, right?
That was one of the big things that came out. Yeah.
You cannot, with any pad, and I know it's just player one apparently on one side of the screen or whatever, but like, you cannot do that on a pad or a stick. So is that Hitbox's problem? No. Is that the developer's problem? Maybe. But the developer, I think it's hard for the developer, to the developer, a button press is a button press. So it would be up to them to program X move can't come out below X frames because that's automatically detected as like a cheat. So that's what I would put as a suggestion. Would I ban them? It's too late for that. I'm not going to state what my opinion on guns in America are, and we're not a political podcast, but it's a little rough to say like, hey everybody, this ain't working, give me your guns back. You can't really do that anymore. Like we're in the shit already. So I cannot realistically see or think of any good reason for a tournament organizer now to say, nope, I am no longer allowing hitboxes. I wouldn't do it either. I would say, nope, we are already in the shit. We have to deal with it. Hitbox is here to stay. Whether I like it or anybody else likes it does not matter. Our opinions are irrelevant. Too many people have these boxes. Too many people play with these boxes in the community and like it and enjoy it. And who am I to step on that? So do I like...
Oh, no.
Normally, no.
Oh, sorry. Could you say that one more time? My internet hiccuped, and I think I want to make sure I get this
quote
in its entirety.
So do I like the 4-frame supers, doing something on an input device that you cannot humanly physically do on a pad or a stick? No. But it's just too late for it. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it. Tournament organizers cannot ban hitboxes. We just can't do it. Plus, even if we wanted to, it wouldn't matter anyway. Hitbox has their hands in the company. Hitbox has their hands in too many majors and organizations and major players, etc. So it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, and
weird political comparison. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. That's actually a really, really great analogy when you think about it, because it has invaded the community, right? It's not something that when it first came out, there was the whole thing about the SOCD stuff and all that stuff, right? But it's that's something that they would have had to like nip in the bud like right then and started really putting something in at that point before it became as popular as it is. Because at this point, like you said, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, even if you start that conversation. If I say I'm starting this tournament, blah blah blah, everybody's welcome except hitbox players. Like not, whether they were going to show up or not, that
Shooting
doesn't
yourself
matter
in the
because
foot right
now
there.
I'm going to get put out on social media. It's like, hey, do you guys agree with this guy's rule set and banning hitbox? And now maybe people that would normally come to the tournament anyway that don't even use hitbox are just going to look at it and be like, I'm not even going to support this guy because
Yeah,
I don't support this.
yeah, it's too late. It's way too late now.
So, Benny, you said the
I don't know whose
hitbox
problem it is.
You said the hitbox has invaded the community, and it made me, we've already compared hitboxes to the Second Amendment, and now I'm thinking we should compare it to immigration reform too. I'm kidding.
You know what? That topic is not heated enough already that Jon wants to just like grab
on that fire,
hot, like a hot blacksmithing rod with a bunch of metal on it and just stick it in there.
No, that is a good point. Is like because I think you and I saw the same thread, or all of us saw the same thread on Twitter, which is like Auric freaking out about the super, and then talking about like SOCD and the Windows and it's getting into semantics and stuff. And I do think that Frank, your point is incredibly salient, and that okay, so what is anybody going to do about it? I dare them. Try it. Try running a tournament where hitbox is banned, and then seeing what happens. Right? It's a capitalist thing at this point where your market's going to decide it.
Mm-hmm. What was the percentage of hitbox users when I stopped running like hardcore FGC tournaments in 2015 or 2016? I mean, it was maybe like
less
8%.
than 5%. Yeah, around that.
I think it was higher than that.
1 in 10 players would use it.
I would guess a little under 1 in 10 players. Yes.
Okay.
I would see one hitbox for every 10 sticks, roughly.
Yeah,
so
I can see that. Yeah.
Now isn't it more along the like 25 to 30%?
It's up there.
I would think so. Yeah.
I think even on the anime scene, like it's approaching 50-50. It's approaching it.
Yeah.
I mean, I made sticks for people. I did full custom sticks modded to the absolute, massive craziness, and then have them 6 months later be like, this is cool, but I'm going to switch to hitbox.
Hey, that reminds me. The end of last show, we were wondering, when it came to Fatty's keyboard, did you have a Brooks board in there, or was that a pad hack?
No, I've pad hacked a million times, but pad hacking a PS4 controller is not the most ideal. His first one, I used a PS3, PS4 fighting board, which is one of those tiny squares.
Yep.
That had no screw terminals on it. And cat. And and then on his more recent one, the one that I did with the sticker bomb, that was using a Brook Universal. And that came with screw terminals. And I manually removed all of the screw terminals for clearance purposes. To put it in the bottom. I did a full 28-minute tutorial on how I did that. Yeah. It's got a decent amount of views too. I really hope that helped inspire, because I've always been more of a teach a man to fish kind of guy. I don't want people to give me $500 to make them a keyboard fight stick. I want them to watch my video and do it themselves and learn. So, but
I get you.
Yeah, Brook Universal in the second one.
Okay,
that was a hell of a time.
That's something that we did. We were hoping we were going to talk about, but I mean, we did end up talking about like convention stuff more. Which I mean, that's kind of where a lot of people know you from. They know you as the Con TO, and like I feel like that was the gateway for a lot of people to possibly even maybe not get into the community, but maybe hear about the community, hear about the kind of hardcore side. Because like aside from you running tournaments, like you said, a lot of times it would be like, hey, if you're interested in playing in this, there's these guys doing this at the gaming zone, or this going on here and there.
Yeah, he was our front door, man. That was ultimately it. He was the front door to the community in a lot of ways. A lot of people joined the scene because of those con tournaments, and because of the gaming shop tournaments, because of the comic book shop tournaments.
Yeah,
That
because you
makes
gotta.
that makes me feel really good. You say that.
It's a fact. It's a fact, and I hope that this podcast episode, at the very least, shows that everybody knows that fact, man.
I appreciate it. I have felt a little forgotten over the last couple of years. I know there's probably a lot of new guys in the FGC who have
Oh, it's
no
completely different.
idea who I
Yeah.
am, and
Yeah.
then not only that, but being a TO, you're not always the
Yeah, you're not the face. Yeah, you're not the face. You're the behind the scenes guy, right?
well. I mean, I was kind of being the face and the I was kind of doing it all, but you're not always favored by everyone. So like
Yep.
people talk. So like most people are like, oh yeah, well, I used to think you were an asshole, but then I got to know you. And I'm like that's literally the story of everyone who's ever met me. So, and it's usually because so-and-so talks about,
Yep.
this guy did this or that, or well, really? Okay. All right. Whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I don't miss about the FGC anymore. And that's any community though. It's not the FGC in particular. It's literally just human beings just being human.
Yeah.
There are going to be some conversations we need to have on this podcast regarding parts of the history of the Arizona FGC that are not pretty. And I think we're going to have a couple of those tough conversations in the near future. And I'd love to have you back on for some of those, because I think we need to have an unfiltered view on that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff. And then like the tech talk thing, like I said, like that's something that you were heavily involved in with the arcade modding, arcade
didn't even
modding.
get in touch on that. Yeah. That's a huge part of it.
You guys are talking to the Show Ryukin Tech Talk Modder of the Year 2014.
Hey.
And
like
very
I said,
minimal tech talk, but
yeah, I mean, it gives us a reason to have you back. So we hope that you'll come back.
Yeah,
I will.
Once again,
it allows me to reflect a lot more and appreciate it, and not have as much a percentage of hostility.
Do you have any shout outs before we close out the show here? Any shout outs?
No, I don't.
Okay. Any social media
have
follows?
Fun.
Anything you want to plug?
No, don't care. That's major difference between old me and new me is I just don't care anymore. I don't care.
But how did you find us?
Or promotion or marketing. I don't have anything to promote.
How did you find us?
How did you find us?
Let's see. I've known this Jon, aka Muji guy, through some tough times. I mean, I even saw him in a hospital bed, and it made me cry.
Yeah.
And I've known this Benny guy and his family for like super long as well, and they're good people. And yeah, I don't do social media that much anymore. I'm sure you guys notice I barely ever post. I think my post about this episode was like my first post in weeks. And it's just that I don't really care anymore, but I still come in every once in a while and I'll scroll for a little bit, but I try to stay very far away now.
I gotcha. Well,
for mental sake, and I got my own stuff going on. So
we appreciate you coming out of your hidey hole then to hang out with us for this amount of time.
Anytime. Next time you guys are going out to a lunch or dinner, let me know. I see some of those photos sometimes. I'm like, oh, I miss those people.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
We can figure something out. Well, anyway, for all those of you tuning in, you can find us live when we go live. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Spiral Series. YouTube, you can find the VOD at youtube.com/Spiral Series, or on Spotify, on Apple and Apple Podcasts. Man, I always mess that up, as Absolute Guard. For next week, we are actually going to be doing a show on Tuesday, because next Thursday is the first day of the NFL season, and this might not go well with some of you AZ people, but I am a Rams fan, so I got to watch the defending Super Bowl champs play their first game of the season. So we are actually going to go live on Tuesday at 5 p.m. with Nick Going, aka Driftwood from Tucson. So that'll be a fun conversation. Haven't talked to him in a while, so we're looking forward to that. And again, just want to thank you again, Frank, for your time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Have you back on again for some future talk, whether it's about drama or arcade stick modding or whatever. But yeah, we'll definitely have you back on again sometime.
Ooh, I want drama. That'd be awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks
Thanks, guys.
everybody for
Thank you.
listening.
See ya.
We got Rockin's dope outro music.